Hello and welcome to Caleb's Corner. It's been a while. I, like a lot of people over quarantine, had to find something to dedicate my time into. That became writing, and also YouTube videos, which one stuck, the other didn't. I haven't made a YouTube video in almost 4 years. Um, I started processing this idea for a short story sometime like the year before, 2018. 2019, and finally I was like, I'm gonna write this. I'm just gonna write a full story out, see where it goes. And pretty quickly I realized that wow, this is not really a short story. It's more like a novella. Because by the end, my original target was about 40 to 50 pages, and by the end of my first draft, I think it was about 75. This is the first time I'd written anything that length. It's also the first time I've really been that dedicated to writing a full story out. So I finished that novel in April, May of 2020, and I don't touch it for over a year, just about. And I am working on other projects during that time. I touch on a fantasy novel or fantasy just world that I had written a little bit about in college, and I write part of a science fiction novel. Not super sticking. Then comes beginning in 2022. Um, I decide I'm gonna take every Saturday and write for 4 hours. And I'm gonna try to put 2 hours in during the work week. And I'm going to write this novel in a year. Well, I didn't write this novel in a year. It's 2024. It was very bold of me to assume I could write a whole novel in a year. I'm not quite that level yet, and I have to work a full-time job. But this video is about that process, how I wrote a novel, what I learned, what I'm gonna do differently the second time around. Yeah, so let's jump into things I've learned writing my first fantasy novel. My first step, and probably one of the most important things, is just learning what works best for you as an individual when writing. I learned pretty quickly that I work best in large blocks of time. So give me like 4 hours and I'll pump out a lot, but like I can't work on something every day for 20 or 30 minutes. I much prefer a larger block of time. Part of this is also like figuring out what your writing process is. At the beginning of each session I write, I would reread what I worked on previously. This does slow things down a little bit sometimes. But for me, it does two things. One, it helps me get in the headspace of where I was when I was writing before. And two, it just helps fix any dumb small grammatical errors. So one thing I learned in my process is I much preferred to stay writing or editing for longer. And what I mean by that is instead of writing a chapter, then going back and editing it, writing a chapter, going back and editing, I learned I did a lot better, and I felt like my product was better if I wrote 8-10 chapters, sat in that writing process, get the story out more, and then went back and edited. But my editing process is basically I would create a new document, take a paragraph, copy it into the new document, and basically rewrite the paragraph. I think that you always say something better the second time. And that just comes with like learning your style. And again, part of this whole first concept I'm trying to say is like learn what works for you. Which takes us to number two. Number two is it will take much longer than you think. So like I said, my goal for 2022 was to complete a novel. And I honestly got kind of close. Granted, I had the benefit of I turned the novella I wrote in 2020 based into the first act. And so in 2022, I came in and wrote the second act. And then after I wrote Act 2, I rewrote Act 1. Basically, major rewrite. I rewrote the whole thing. I think I barely even looked at the original manuscript, which I think was fine because it'd been so long since I have been separated from it. And then Act 3 was really hard for me. I basically spent from like late September 2022 until basically like April or so of last year. I get stuck rewriting the same scenes. I get the same point every time, and I just don't know how to continue. I have an end goal. I know what the end goal is, but that last like third of Act 3, where you're getting to the climax, it took me probably 6 months to figure it out. That being said, like figuring that part out was annoying and it was frustrating as all get out. But ultimately, like, it was fun. Like, I can't ever say really that this process was frustrating because I just enjoyed working on it so much. So I will say, like, having a plan would have made this process go by faster. Doing it in order may have made it done faster, but I don't actually think by much. So again, number 2 is just like it will take longer, and you need to be okay with that. But just like let the process write itself out, be consistent, stay in the world, and get it done. My third point is most of your time writing will actually be editing. And that might sound dreadful to some of y'all. And writing, it can suck, you know. I much look forward to the sessions where I could sit down and know I'm just gonna be writing outright for as long as I can. Those were a lot of fun. But as anyone who has written a lot can tell you, like, your first time writing anything, it's gonna be sloppy. And the real magic comes from the editing process. I liken a lot of my writing process to, like, carving a marble statue. Now, what I mean by that is the story goes about Michelangelo that the hunk of marble that would be Michelangelo's David was a broken, cracked piece of marble. And it went around to different artists, and different artists for like decades tried to do something useful for this big hunk of marble. Because a hunk of marble that big is super expensive, and people won't want to waste it. And so Michelangelo got it, and he saw David in it, but he had to reveal him. So a lot of my writing feels very much to me, I will see fractions of a scene or see parts of a scene, and from there I have to dig around it, reveal what's actually happening, reveal what's happening around it. But just like writing a novel, you can get a rough cut of a novel pretty quickly. But what takes a long time is the editing process, or keeping the marble analogy going, the sanding, and just like fine tuning. So yeah, a lot of your time will be editing. Get used to it. Editing is the most intensive part, but ultimately is the most rewarding part. If I just wrote through this whole novel without going back and like reading and really editing and tuning mistakes, it wouldn't even be half as good. It would be like, I did this good. I have something I'm very proud of, and I think it's because I did take the time to plug away and really make this work more than just a story I wrote. It's I think it's a genuine piece of like craft to a point. You know, I'm not gonna hype myself up too much, but you know, it's something I'm very proud of for my current position. So, which brings us to point number 4, which is, you know, have a plan, but be okay to let the plan burn a little bit. This is a really hard one for myself. I think a lot of people, you know, we become very attached to the stories we try to create. And sometimes the plan you had isn't good. Or just like there's a better plan to be had. You have to be okay with changing those mistakes, or changing a character arc, changing a storyline, because it just works better for the grand story. To rephrase what I'm trying to say, like, don't let your desire for a story to play out a certain way to hinder the development of the overall story. So a really good example of this is I had finished my first full manuscript. I sent it to my friend to read, and he basically said, like, I like your book a lot. I hate your first chapter. which is like a weird thing to hear, because that's the first thing you read, and I had spent a lot of time plugging away, like really trying to like refine that first chapter or something good. The, all the critiques he had were like fair, and I had to just be okay with, okay, I want this book to be the best thing as possible. I'm gonna kill my vision for the opening of this novel for something different. And do I still like that original opening? Yeah, I think it works. But I do think because of that critique, I was able to make something better, which kind of leads us into like a subsection of this point, which is like to take critique. These are intense, deep things we work on. These works of art, really. So it can be hard to, have the humility to like take the L and, have a mistake. Which that kind of leads us into a good like subsection of this point, is that you need to be able to take critique well. These are very personal things we make, these stories. We can love them too much in a way. And that's what this point means, is like, have your plan but let it burn. When you have good criticism, hear it. And part of the issue is finding good criticism, good people to take your work, critique it, talk on it. That could be really hard to find. So again, you have to learn how to let your plan die to a point. You know your story best. There's also been times where I've had people give me notes that I disagreed with, which is fair. You can disagree with notes, but also be more willing to accept most notes, I would say. So my last one is kind of twofold, and it's reread before you write and make one change at a time. I think rereading is before you start writing is important. One, because I think rereading what you wrote before helps you see mistakes early, and two, helps you get in the mindset of what you're writing. And the second part of make one change at a time, it can be difficult. Several points in my writing, I thought of a different alternative and I wanted to jump into it. But a good example of this is towards the end of my writing. It was actually like done, sort of, as done as you can be, And I had a thought for changing a few scenes around because something wasn't quite working for me. So as I started to go do and make this change, I realized there was a simpler solution. So why I think this is important is like, you can make yourself a lot of work if you change too much at once. You can save yourself a lot of time if you're a little bit more methodical about what you change. It's something I wish I had figured out better earlier. Because it can take a lot of time to change whole story plots around. Especially if you change something early in the story, it's going to have reverberations for the whole book. Now, the example I'm talking about was like, it wasn't a third act, but it was going to change a lot of the third act for me. And as I was writing it, I said, like, I figured out a whole new alternative that was simpler and better. And what I'm trying to get at with this is a simple alternative isn't just going to save you time, but ultimately I think simple always works better. The goal is just to be intentional with where you're going. Be intentional with the changes you make, because the more changes you make, the more changes you're going to have to fix. And you don't want to spend months of just bug stomping, which, like, it happens. Sometimes it has to. Sometimes you make a change late, and that's just how it's going to have to be. I had sent in my first manuscript to my friend to be read, and he casually mentioned, oh, wouldn't it have been cool if this happened? And I was like, oh my, that makes so much more sense. And sometimes you will have those moments where like you do have to go back and make that pretty significant rewrite. I think also we have to be wary of those times. Don't get too excited when you have a new fun idea or new kind of alternative. Like really suss it out. So one way I started to kind of process how I was going to make changes, I would ask, what is the goal to change? What thing am I fixing with this fix? So once you can answer that, you can kind of take a step back and start asking, okay, well, what are alternative other ways I can ask this? Because depending on how difficult it's going to be, it could just be a simple, like, few sentences in a paragraph, fix, easy, done. Great, do it. But if it's going to be, like, in my case, where I had to rewrite like, part of Act 3, I really had to suss out, like, okay, is this beneficial? What can I do better? Like, is this beneficial? Is this going to be better for the story? And ultimately, do I want to put in the work to make this fix? All of this to say is be intentional with how you write. Be intentional with your time. Go in as much as plans you feel comfortable with. You know, I'm not a huge outliner. I have a pretty good idea of how scenes will go out. I outline like I outline arcs, I outline acts pretty deeply, but I don't go into that much detail about individual chapters unless there's a lot of very specific points I need to get into. Find your tempo, find your pace, find like what process works best, and just keep doing that. And you'll get done. It will take a while, but that's part of the glory of it. So just go through real quick the very wise, astute observations I've made over the course of writing this novel for the past 2 years are just learn what works for you. It will take much longer than you think. Most of your writing is actually going to be editing. Have your plan, but let it burn. And finally, reread before you write. Make one change at a time. If you're wondering how you can read my novel, well, I don't know yet, fully. I would like to seek publication in some capacity. I have avoided thinking about that most of this process because I knew if I got too wrapped up and thinking about publishing, I wouldn't finish this the way I wanted it to. So the plan now is to put the first 50 pages or so in my Substack, which I will link in the bio doobly-doo below. And after the first 50 pages, subsequently, like every 2 weeks, every once a month, release a batch of chapters. And my plan is to have most of this behind paywall available by 2025, mid-2025. Now, I don't know exactly that's all going to plan out. I know for sure I'm going to release the first chunk for free. I want to grow this channel. One, because I want to be part of the BookTube community. I want to involve myself in the community I want to write in, you know? And two, because publishers really want someone with a social media standing. That's cool, that's great. I'm trying to hustle that grind, you know? Am I good at it? No. I haven't made a video in 4 years. But that's okay. And we're going to do this together. It's going to be great. And honestly, I didn't write this novel to get published. I wrote this novel because I want to do it. I do plan to start a new novel this year. I don't plan for it to be in the same world as what I've been working on. Do I know exactly what this new novel is? Very, very rough ideas. Join my Substack. Subscribe, like, you know, get me 8 million subscribers so I can get published and handshake, high five Brandon Sanderson. And yeah, thank you for listening and hanging out. I do plan to be making more videos about writing in this year. Just depends how I can figure things out, you know. This is all new. I don't love editing video. This is a fake, or it's a real mic. It's not connected to anything. I know the audio sucks. I don't have money right now to like do that. So, you know, maybe if this gets big, I'll be motivated to get a setup that actually works and functions like it's supposed to. But yeah, thank you guys. It's been fun. If you have any other tips, if you have any questions, If you guys want to chat about books, let's do it. I have 2 books left in Wheel of Time. I can't wait to be done, but I love it so much. Um, that's probably what I'm gonna be reading until I'm done. And then I need to read The Secret Projects. Will I do that next? I don't know because Stormlight 5 is coming out this year. And if you know your boy likes Stormlight. And I know if I get a whiff of, if I wet my palate even a little bit, reading Way of Kings, I'll just have to reread all 4 of them. And that's going to take up a lot of the year because I don't read fast. Now, my goal, my want, my desire is to actually like just read Stormlight 4 again because there's lots of other things I want to read. I was given some books for Christmas. There's a lot of things I want to read. But then, I think about Way of Kings and I'm just like, oh, the vibes, they're so good. I have to do it again. So maybe I'll just get stuck in Stormlight again this year. It'll be great. But maybe I'll branch out too. If you have suggestions, good series, let me know. It's gonna be a good year. We're all gonna write awesome books. Yeah, let's go. Let's do it to it, guys. Peace out.